This is the Enjoyer Podcast. I'm your host, James Dixon.
If we are going to save our state, Michigan Republicans need an attitude adjustment. I'm not talking about just the party or just the elected lawmakers. They're doing fine, all things considered, and especially accounting for recent history. So this message isn't so much directed at party officials as the Republican voter in Michigan. Gotta be honest, guys, I'm seeing a lot of stinking thinking out there that could compromise our ability to save our state. If you go into the 2026 election thinking that everything is rigged, everybody's a cuck, you're not going to work hard enough to win. We tell other people this all the time. Victim culture doesn't help anybody. It's easy to see it when it's feminists or minorities asking for special benefits. But staying down in the doldrums, that's its own form of victimhood. And you have to break free from this immediately. Yesterday. Here's the good news. The prison door is locked from the inside. You can escape anytime you want. There's a reason the Michigan House was the only legislative body in America to flip in November's election. With our backs against the wall, we saved our state. As best we could, anyway. Notice that it was only the House that flipped. That's because the Senate wasn't on the ballot. That's because the governor's office wasn't on the ballot. But they will be in 2026. You say you want to save Michigan. Well, now would be a good time to get involved. Not sure if you've heard, but 2026 is the ultimate battle for Michigan. Governor, Secretary of State, Attorney General, in a state that tends to reelect its incumbents. This is the first ultimate battle we've had since 2018. There won't be another one till 2034. Let me put this in your head. If Democrats were to hold the Michigan governor's office between 2019 and 2035, it'll be too late. All the people who could have saved Michigan will have left for other states that won't be running on solar panels and windmills in 2040. This is it. 2026 is it. Don't think there's going to be some miracle in 2030. And in fact, I would ask you to think about it like this. When Alyssa Slotkin, the senator, makes her way back onto the ballot in 2030, what do you want to accompany her on that ballot? Do you want her to be going against a Republican governor, Republican Secretary of State, Republican Attorney General, and Alyssa Slotkin by her lonesome? Or do you want a crew of Democrats trying to make it another blue wave year? Totally up to you. And I get it. We all watch a lot of TV. Everybody wants a hero to emerge in the governor's race. Maybe he'll ride in on horseback or perhaps on a donkey. What I'm asking is for you to be heroic. I blame Fox News for our conundrum here. And as much as I admire the man, I blame the late Roger Ailes. Fox News taught an entire generation of conservatives that the revolution was televised and could be fought on their couches. That the job of everybody in politics and government is to entertain them so they can keep watching. I call it continue watching conservatism. You know, when you're sitting there and your Roku or Amazon Prime asks, do you want to keep watching a show? There are people for whom pressing yes is the only physical activity they get. And that lethargy is how we got this close to a permanent communist takeover in America. Just because we've avoided the gulag doesn't mean we don't need to change. I promise we do. So here's my advice as we approach 2026. Make a list of the traits or positions you want in a candidate. Find a candidate you like and fight like hell for them in the primary. Then after the primary, regardless of who wins, fight like hell to support the winner. This part's important. Don't get butthurt. Don't take your ball and go home if your guy doesn't win. By now you must know. After years of, man, you guys hate it so much, rhinos so much that we ran the rhinos out of town, didn't we? And then what happened? The Democrats held all the gavels in Lansing and they damn near steered our state into Lake Michigan. So by now you must know that any communist you could elect is much worse than a Republican you happen to disagree with. And so this next phase is going to demand a certain emotional maturity. Every time you demand that Gretchen Whitmer be arrested or Jocelyn Benson be removed from office, and unfortunately I hear this kind of thing from people all the time on Twitter, you're revealing and reveling in your own impotence. You're actually telling the world how much power you don't have. You're emoting at the expense of being strategic. And the sad part is, guys, I'm mostly hearing this from men who are 50 plus. It's enough. I don't have time for these foolish games. You don't have time for these foolish games. Let that hurt go. At this point, it doesn't matter who stole what, who endorsed Trump years ago, who voted to impeach, any of these side issues. All that matters in 2026 is your future and your family. And I promise, anytime you get off course, I'll be sure to redirect you. When there was Donald Trump on the ballot in November, you told me you would crawl through glass to support the man. Would you crawl through glass to save your state? We'll find out. And between now and Election Day 2026, we'll offer plenty of reasons why you should. So my message to the Republican voter is this. It might be advice JFK would give. Ask not what the 2026 candidates can do for you. Certainly don't ask them to entertain you. That's weird. Ask what you can do for them. Ask how you can help. What gift can you give? I get what you guys all want. No one quite says it outright, but I get what you want. You want something that doesn't exist in Michigan. You want some billionaire to emerge who's also a TV star. And maybe he's also been in prominent in the media the last 40, 50 years. He's a household name and somehow descends from an escalator, perhaps, to save our state. We don't have a Donald Trump in Michigan. What we do have, though, is a lot of good men and a lot of good women who care about our state. And my guest today is one of them. Aric Nesbitt is Senate Minority Leader and the first person to officially announce their candidacy for governor in 2026. Not this exploratory committee, not an announcement of an announcement to come. No, with action. He joined the race. He didn't stick his toe in the water. He jumped in, and he found that the water was warm. Action was rewarded when Nesbitt raised $1 million within the first day. And so again, my message to Republican voters, don't ask what these people can do for you. Don't ask them to entertain you. Ask what your part is in saving our state. I've heard enough, and you've certainly said enough, reasons why not. Forget that. I'm tired of talking about that. What can you do? Can you cut a check? Can you send a tweet? Can you knock a door? Can you send a mailer? Can you get signatures for one of the ballot initiatives that's going to accompany whoever the candidate for governor is on the ballot? Because if you're not planning to win, you must be comfortable losing. Look, guys, I get it. It's early days yet. We got plenty of time. But right now, it's our hearts and our minds that need to change. Let go of the hurt. Look toward the future. 2022 was a long time ago. Aric, thank you so much for joining us on the Enjoyer podcast.
Hey, thanks, James. Thanks for having me on. Long-time listener, first-time caller, as they'd say on El Rushbo.
Absolutely. Aric, we'll start here. What do you enjoy about Michigan?
I mean, my family's been here for nearly 200 years. We've been here for 7 generations, and I just couldn't imagine growing up anywhere else. I grew up on a 6th-generation dairy and grape farm, and it's just whether we were target shooting, hunting. We had a little called Grass Lake out back. We'd go canoeing. We'd go hunting, squirrel hunting, and in the summertime, even though it was hard work, whether it was out baling hay or dehorning cattle or milking cows, we just got the job done. I think that's something I love about Michigan is Michigan's full of folks that just want to get the job done, no drama. And that's what, I couldn't imagine growing up anywhere else. And I think people expect a governor that really works just as hard as they do.
Well, let's get right into it. Why are you running for governor?
I mean, Michiganders deserve so much better than what they're getting out of Lansing and their state government today. I hear it all the time. And instead of putting Michigan families first, Michigan students first, Michigan workers first, it seems like Governor Whitmer and the Democrats in Lansing are too busy raising taxes, putting punitive regulations on small business owners and farmers across the state, trying to prevent them from growing. The wokeism in our public schools, where folks can't define what a woman is, or I have a 5-year-old daughter, a 2-year-old son. We have a third one on the way. And let's be honest, my wife and I, we're in the fight now, and she knows how important the future of our state is in terms of education. We're in the bottom 10. Mississippi's ahead of us on reading scores. Mississippi. And what we've seen out of Lansing over the last 6 years with Governor Whitmer, the last 2 years with the Democrat trifecta, really has led us to a lot of the bottom lists in education, infrastructure. The only thing that's not going, that we're not losing rankings on seems to be cost of living and crime right now.
Aric, I hear this from a lot of people. The other day I put out on Twitter, I believe at our state of 10 million people, when you look at someone who could do it and is courageous enough to do it, could raise the money to do it, could build the coalition, is willing to take the personal sacrifice, there's probably 50 or fewer people walking around our state of 10 million who could be governor. And then people will say, well, it's a bigger list, but people don't want to run because mean things are said about you. But I'm looking at you running. You have a young family at home and you're still doing this. So we hear a lot of those reasons why not. What makes this worthwhile to do with a young family?
Yeah, I mean, talking to my wife and my family before making the announcement was the number one thing. I knew Michigan needs a different course of leadership. Michiganders deserve so much better than they're getting out of state government today. But working with my wife, 2 weeks ago before we went to bed, I leaned over and I'm like, are we really going to do this? And the Polish Catholic girl that she is, she did an expletive, yeah. My media guys say I should say heck yeah, but she's kind of a no-nonsense type of gal, and she's just tired of seeing what we're seeing. Let's get back to basics.
Right.
The United States of America is turning 250 years old next year. Let's not try to figure it out how to survive for another 4 years or 10 years, right? Let's figure out how to survive another 250 years. Our founders were great men that stood against great adversaries. And I went to Hillsdale College for a reason, worked my way through there, did my economics degree, because in foundations of American government, I think we need to get back to basics: patriotism, our traditional family values, our community, instead of big government, big media, big unions, big businesses, this wokeism that's pervading, the DEI and wokeism that's pervading our education systems. And I think President Trump, with his no-nonsense, taking it to the man last year, really provided, I think, an opportunity for us to engage very diverse communities across the state. And that's why I'm starting so early, is because I'm going to have to engage diverse communities from downriver and Dearborn up to Ironwood to Monroe.
It's funny you say that, because the video was great. The rollout is great. You're definitely a known figure within Lansing, but the thing people always want to bring up, name recognition and geography. But then I look to Michigan history. Gretchen Whitmer, a minority senator, not especially well known outside of Lansing, takes on someone who would won a statewide race, and Bill Schuette beats him. I look at John Engler, majority senator in Lansing, takes on a 2-time incumbent governor, beats him. So history says this can be done, but you mentioned it, like why you're starting so early is the name recognition and the geography part of why you need to get started so early.
In looking at this next election, is that, and from my own history, is that nobody is going to outwork me. I'm going to be out there working hard. Unfortunately, you got to raise a lot of money. I can't stroke a 7-figure, 8-figure check. But I know something from this last week is that there's a lot of folks. I think, as you said it earlier, the water's warm. people want a vision for Michigan. That's not what Governor Whitmer's done over the last 6 years of what we've seen out of the Democratic trifecta the last 2 years. They want a Michigan government that gets out of their way, that delivers service, that actually fixes the damn roads, that actually issues permits when folks ask for them, that actually has predictability, and that's small enough that doesn't tell folks whether you're critical or not. That's small enough that doesn't say you can't go to that school because you live on a different zip code. That we actually empower the individual, empower families before the state. And that's something where I think people are excited about. And the lies that the mainstream media is saying about, Donald Trump in the Republican Party last year, I think people saw through that, whether they're in Muslim communities in Hamtramck or Dearborn, whether they're in Oakland County, whether they're up north. And I think folks say, hey, let's return to the basics. The individual first, the family first, our community first, our churches first. And whether you, no matter who you worship or how you want to raise your kids, that let's go ahead and let's empower our parents and families. And that's why I'm rolling out a Michigan, the Michigan First agenda, is that it's about students first, not teachers unions. It's about families first, not woke government. It's about workers first instead of corporate welfare for some of these most profitable multinational corporations, and some that are owned by the Chinese Communist Party.
Aric, I heard an echo of Barry Goldwater in there talking about, he used to say that a government that's big enough to give you anything you wanted could also take it all away. And it sounds like I'm hearing some Hillsdale in there too. It sounds like you want the executive office in particular to be less powerful than it is. How would you go about defanging the governor's office a bit so we could not have a repeat of 2020?
Well, let's be honest, is that what states are growing? I mean, 2 years ago, the governor issued this Michigan Population Commission, and then she issued a report about 15 months ago, and it was a pretty damning indictment of her first 5 years. Here we have one of the highest cost of governments per capita in the Midwest. We have some of the poorest performing schools, poorest performing infrastructure. We're lagging behind population growth. And what does this governor do in this Democrat majority? They raise taxes. They steal from the teacher pension fund. They go ahead and divert money. They waste a $9 billion surplus. And going back to your original question, is like just compare Indiana to Michigan. I remember, my birthday's coming up tomorrow, actually. I remember 4 years ago when I had to go to Indiana to celebrate my birthday because they had a place where you could actually order food from this business that they come out and serve you. You order off a menu, and they come out with and you leave a payment, and they're called restaurants, and they were forced to close down. And
right.
And I had to go 40 miles south, and here we're at this another fork in the road for the hospitality business. The restaurants and restaurant workers across the state, bar owners have been kicked in the teeth over the last 5 years, have been pummeled. And what's happening right now with a partisan Supreme Court last year saying, you know what, we're going to take away this tip credit, destroy 50,000 restaurant jobs in Michigan, and go ahead and take away paid time off to some of the hardest working Michiganders for a one-size-fits-all sick leave policy. And you have these big out-of-state special interest groups that are pushing them to do nothing. Fortunately, we won back the state house with Speaker Hall and a Republican majority. They passed it this past week, and I just need one vote from the Michigan Senate to actually save 50,000 restaurant jobs. And just compare it to Indiana, that's grown by 800,000 people the last 20 years, and Michigan's only grown by 40,000. If we continue on the status quo, we're going to lose another 700,000 net people over the next 30 years. That's unacceptable. That means poorer state, less economic growth, and that means less families here in Michigan.
Aric, you're a few years older. You're about to turn 45, and happy birthday and congrats on that. So you may have experienced this a little differently because my girlfriend we have the same age gap, and so even a 5-year thing makes a difference. I'm 40.
Yeah.
So Christmas morning, I
My
wake
wife's
up.
still 29, so don't worry about that.
Ow! Love to hear that. Uh, so Christmas morning, I wake up and rather than be greeted by Christmas cheer and tidings of goodwill, I see Vivek Ramaswamy slandering Zach Morris and AC Slater. What do you know about Saved by the Bell? Were you ready to take up the defense of Kelly Kapowski on that day? How did that all land for you?
So growing up in our family, we were limited to 10 hours of TV a week. And I know this is kind of surprising for folks with the amount of screen time that
Right.
people have there.
I'm
But
like, that's 2 days. That's a week.
and we had to map it out. We had to have pre-approval time in our household, with my mom. And believe me, sometimes we didn't even reach the 10 hours because there was farm work to do. And I remember Saved by the Bell, but it wasn't one of those things that slid into those 10 hours each week. My wife was a big fan of Beverly Hills 90210. So you can
that was
you
kind
can
of
do
the
a
that was like
podcast for her on that.
that was like the dark side. Like if Saved by the Bell were dark and a drama, it would be 90210.
Now, Fresh Prince, I watched a few of those. So
Okay.
yeah.
Aric, I believe Michigan needs to build a wall. And it's not necessarily keep anyone out. We need to keep our kids in. So I see our state losing thousands of college graduates per year from our state universities. We're bringing in 12,000 HB1s, 70-something thousand illegals per year, not to even mention 30+ thousand abortions per year. So we have all of the roots it takes to be a growing state with our native population. And instead, we've decided that death and replacement are the better options. How do you stop these trends in Michigan?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's economic opportunity. I always say, just like electricity follows the path of least resistance, capital follows the path of least resistance. And we continue to have a bureaucracy in Lansing that continues to put up resistors to investments, whether it's through the Department of Environmental Quality or the DNR. I mean, I hear it time and time again from small business owners here in Michigan that aren't getting a dime of corporate welfare, right? That are trying to invest and grow their family business, and they're being denied and shut down from the permits that's happening out of Lansing. I mean, I have examples in Muskegon, Holland, and Pontiac, and in Cassopolis. In time and time again, it's not some corporation from MEDC writing a check. It's the fact, like, let us know that in 3 months we can actually get this permit taken care of. And I hear it. Ohio does a pretty good job about it.
Aric, what you're saying right now, so think about it. If you were to read the papers, you would think that Governor Whitmer has a hand in every job that's created in Michigan. Yes. That but for MEDC, there wouldn't be job growth. And conservatives have always argued that that's really just masking tape. And so for every big announcement you get, what it does is so you're in league with the biggest companies to keep these fake jobs, flowing. But things like you just said, the business owner who can't get routine permits, we need to stop giving special treatment and just do the basic thing. It seems the answer is obvious. So how is the exact opposite what's happening, where you're forcing, corporate welfare onto these big projects, but other people just want to be allowed to do business, and they can't do it.
Yeah, some people call it the opium drip of economic development, as these cash handouts. Other people, you do it by economic development via public relations. And this is something where I think we've had a governor for 6 years that cares more about her public relations and TikTok videos than actually cares about the next 20 years, 30 years, the next generation of the state. I mean, I here you have Goshen up in Big Rapids that is getting hundreds of millions of dollars in cash handouts from the company, again, from the state, CCP related company. And they're saying, all these permits, environmental permits, are going to take no problem. Easy peasy. I had a company in Cass County, south of me, where I live, not a dime of state handouts. That it was a $140 million investment, aluminum recycling plant, 20 miles away from the Indiana border. And after the groundbreaking, I get a call from the person doing the industrial park saying, I can't get going on the water and sewer. And this was 3 months later. And he goes, I can't get a curb cut from MDOT. So I call up MEDC and I'm like, hey, can we hurry up and get a curb cut? Oh, that's an MDOT issue. I'm like, you guys always say you're part of Team Michigan. Why don't you step up and be part of Team Michigan, right? And so it took me a week and a half of going back and forth with the MDOT director to get a curb cut because they couldn't figure out ownership of the sidewalk. Who's going to do maintenance of a sidewalk? $140 million investment in rural Michigan, 70 new jobs, the possibility of doubling that. And they were 3 months behind schedule because of a curb cut on a rural highway.
Right there.
And I hear it time after time, whether it's hundreds of millions of dollars ready to go into Muskegon along the harbor, whether it's a manufacturing business with 800 employees that's being dragged out by the DEQ in Holland because they couldn't get a permit and they're already $1 million into legal bills, or whether it's a manufacturing company in Pontiac that can't even get a call back from MEDC because they're trying to compete with a no income tax state like Florida or Texas and just trying to get a level playing field. None of these folks want a cash handout like what you see the governor doing. And I have a real history of it. Mackinac Center does a business subsidy survey on real votes. And I think I'm in the bottom 5 of any legislator that's ever served in terms of voting against this stuff. So it's not just chatter. It's actually I have a real record. And part of and I would have voted against more if I wasn't in leadership in 15 and 16, where a lot of these things never even came up because Speaker Cotter and I just never brought up the corporate welfare stuff because we didn't believe it. That wasn't the way to do economic development.
I talk about it all the time, but it really helps for people to hear other voices. Please impress on everybody the importance of this ultimate battle of 2026. I think we were all maybe a little bit naive. You come off in 2018, off 8 years of Republicans running the whole state. And you might think it's always going to be that way. And then 2018 didn't even seem that bad because you didn't lose the legislature. But it was the prelude to it. Please help people understand just how crucial this is, especially since we won't get a bite of that same apple with these seats all open until 2034.
Well, let's go back to 2018. Is that if we wouldn't have lost the governor, we wouldn't have had the shutdowns, lockdowns, the education failures that we have. Being told, are you a critical worker or not a critical worker? What does that do to somebody's mental health? You're not a critical worker. You're laid off. You need to be at home. But the other person's a critical worker. The businesses that were being micromanaged, 1,800 frequently asked questions on the governor's website because of every dictate that they were coming through, having a lawsuit that we had to vote for in the legislature and suing the governor. And it took months and months for us to get a ruling. I co-chaired the COVID oversight committee, and we brought in small business after small business that didn't have a lobbyist in Lansing, whether they were bowling alleys or swimming schools or arcades that the governor kept locked down. Elections matter. Who you elect matters. And I think last year with what you saw is that we had President Trump that was unafraid to go into engage any community around the state.
Yes.
And that's part of the reason why I'm starting so early is that I'm going to be unafraid to engage any community across the state, have that conversation. And it's a big state, 10 million people. You go from Ironwood to Monroe, you go from Muskegon to Port Huron, Alpena to New Buffalo. It's a big state to engage folks in, and I'm ready to stand up and do that engagement. But it's also one other thing is last year we didn't do a pity party. We said we were going to swamp the vote. We were going to work to win on every day, not just on election day. Mm-hmm. You may not like the rules on early voting or early absentee voting or mail-in voting. Those are the rules. They're in the Constitution.
They're the rules.
And
It is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely, James. And so we got to work to win every day. And that's why I'm, worked with the Speaker Hall last year, worked with Pete Hoekstra at the state party. It was great to see Elon Musk Super PAC engaged in Michigan and saying that getting high frequency voters to vote early, getting folks to, especially Republicans, to vote early in person. And let's be honest, we're the working class party, right? We're not this country club Republican Party of yore, right?
Right.
We represent, and I think COVID accelerated it, and Trump exemplified it, right? It is that these folks that have 3 kids, that both parents are working, they're not as involved as we are. That they know polls open on 7, close at 8. We gotta make sure we make a plan to vote, right? Let's go ahead and get them to vote 2 Saturdays before the election, between soccer games on a Saturday. Let's make sure if they're available Sunday afternoon, we get them to vote. And I think we did that last year effectively. And so that's something where you need to have the resources to be able to do that. And that's why it starts early to raising money, is to make sure we have the resource to outreach, make sure we're engaging the grassroots, and make sure that we're delivering a message that's effective. In Michigan, it's a purple state. Like, you can't win an election with just Republican votes. You can't win an election with just Democrat votes.
Right.
But I believe with somebody like me, who grew up on a 6th-generation dairy and grape farm, that have a young family, that we're in the fight today, and somebody that has a positive vision for the state, where you put the individual over the government, where you recognize our traditional values, our free market economic system, our private property rights, somebody who's willing to put Michigan students first instead of Michigan teachers unions first, somebody who's ready to reinstill some patriotism and community first things. I think just back to the basics.
So 2020 was 5 years ago, but people still carry around what happened, the lockdowns. And I hope people never fully forget what happened. A lot of people, the hurt they carry toward the Republican Party is they say, first of all, how the hell did Whitmer sign 1,000 laws her first term with Republicans leading the legislature? That seems like a lot. And then they say, how did the Republicans let this pandemic drag on? There's no such thing as months-long emergencies, but we had month-long emergencies before we had action. How did you spend your pandemic?
Yeah, so we stepped up, and again, as we got into 2020 and 21, I was the COVID Oversight Committee co-chair with now Speaker Matt Hall. He was the House Oversight chair. I was the Senate co-chair, and what we worked on was trying to provide a voice to individuals and small businesses, to students, folks that didn't have a voice. We took on the governor with their no-bid contracts. We uncovered information on how instead of using the data and science that she said she was using polling data and political science to make her decisions. I mean, let's be honest. It's one of those things is they shut down manufacturing businesses, plumbers, pipe fitters, construction workers. We had the toughest shutdowns in the Midwest.
Right.
And we tried to expose her. And unfortunately, when we did sue her, we sued her. I think it was either the end of April or beginning of May in 2020, when it was one person rule. And unfortunately, there's no way for the legislature to do a shot clock with the Supreme Court to get them to rule quickly, like they did in Wisconsin. And we pushed hard. We did finally, we did the Unlock Michigan petitions. I worked in signatures around my district. I know Mark Brewer, the former chair of the state Democratic State Party, said, how could I be collecting petitions in the morning while bailing straw in the afternoon? That was part of the lawsuit when he was trying to get it on. And I'm like, well, like most Michiganders, we can actually work, too many people have to work 2 jobs in a day.
Aric, is Michigan ready for a Hillsdale governor?
I would hope so. I mean, it's been 150 years since we've had one, but it's something where if you know about Hillsdale, you know about the belief in our founding, the importance of our Declaration of Independence as a guide, our Constitution is our is a sacred sacred constitution. And then also our, Judeo-Christian and Greco-Roman, traditions and values. And I do believe that as we look at it, that those kind of values represent America. I mean, we're celebrating 250 years next year as an American country. And it's great to have President Trump as president. And we have an important election. Where do we go as a state? Are we going to be growing? Are we going to be putting Michigan families first? Are we going to just continue on the wokeism of the last few years? And are we going to uproot the DEI in state government and higher education? Are we going to actually say that, we believe in the family structure and we believe in our traditional values?
What would be the Hillsdale approach to the governor's office?
I think
Could we actually expect to see the state budget shrink over time and not just grow and grow and grow?
Well, the one thing I loved about Hillsdale is there was a big conversation that always happened within it from the different parts of your conservative coalition, whether from libertarian folks to social conservatives to other ones in between, business, pragmatic business conservatives. It's a very mixed group of folks. And if you actually spend some time on campus, and I know some in the mainstream media would rather not spend that time and have those discussions. And there's a lot of philosophical backgrounds. I mean, we're built on, our Lockean free market economics, Adam Smith, but
anti-slavery.
Yeah. Well, in Hillsdale was the first school in Michigan, I think second in the U.S. to accept women and blacks on par with white males in 1844 when it was founded.
Which is unheard of. Like that, those weren't even hardly words back then.
They refused to segregate their ROTC units during the World Wars. They refused to play a championship football game in the 1950s when they were, I think, it was a Jacksonville championship game because they wouldn't let their black players play, and they said, "Well, we're not going to play that." And then in the 1970s, when all of a sudden became cool to believe in equal rights and equal protection. They wanted them to count how many black students were on campus, how many minority students were on campus. And they go, we don't ask those questions. We never have, and we never will. And there was a lawsuit that they had with Grove City. And it's a great little school in South Central Michigan. First time I heard about it, I was brush chopping the grapes when I was in 8th grade. And I'd listened to G. Gordon Liddy, if you remember him. And
Nixon guy.
Yeah. I was listening to G. Gordon Liddy, and they're the president of Hillsdale on, and I'm like, where the heck is Hillsdale, Michigan? Where's Hillsdale, Michigan? And when I got home to the farm, having my lunch of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a glass of fresh milk, not homogenized, raw milk. That's what I grew up with.
Okay.
That so I can buy into some of this Maha Bobby Kennedy stuff. Believe me, I don't mind people making decisions on their own on some of the food that they buy and purchase. I looked it up. I'm like, just 90 miles away. And so I always, I was in 8th grade and kept it on my radar. And it was just a wonderful school and a great institution. I've, Dr. Craig and Dr. Arn and Dr. Wolfram, a lot of these folks down in Hillsdale, I still stay in touch with.
Aric, what was going on in your life as an 8th grader that you were listening to G. Gordon Liddy?
I had a balanced listening agenda. I think I started out at NPR first thing out. So we usually get up, do morning chores, right? Run the feed bunks, scrape the Holden area. And I always liked working in the grapes and in the row crops. That was always my thing. And so when you're in the tractor, you usually try to listen to, some talk radio. That's what I did. And so I usually started early in the morning with this would be the 90s NPR, not today's NPR, where there was a little bit, I think a little bit more balance 30 years ago than there was.
At least a pretension of balance.
Yep. Today it's unlistenable. If that's a word. And then G. Gordon Liddy, and then I do Rush Limbaugh, and then I'd finish out the day, a good 10, 12-hour day, on the tractor with a little NPR at the last hour and a half. So I figured that was a good balance, having 2 hours of G. Gordon, 3 hours of Rush, and 2 hours of NPR.
Yeah. We have, before we have the ultimate battle of 2026, we got the Civil War of 2025. Next month, a new party chair is going to be chosen. As a candidate for governor, what do you need from the Michigan Republican Party chair?
Somebody that's not attacking Republicans.
Anything else?
I think that's a first step.
Okay. 11th commandment, thou shalt not speak ill of a fellow Republican.
I think that's the number one thing. Number two is somebody we can trust and get to work. And as I look at them, the four that are running, I know each of them to a varying degree, and I think they're each people that we can trust with the resources there, work to get the grassroots going, and at the end of the day, I've seen the enemy, and it's not us, and it's something where I think any of them will be able to provide a megaphone to be able to take on the Democrats and their socialist wokeism that they continue to push on our state.
I found that in most years over the last 20, whether it's a governor's race or presidential, executives have been boosted by ballot measures that appear on the ballot with them. Is there anything you like to see as you envision a world where you might be that person on the November 2026 ballot? What kind of ballot measure do you need for run support?
Well, it is something where in the past you've seen the left utilize it a lot more effectively than the right in terms of trying to work to turn out voters. You saw that
Absolutely.
3 years ago. I do think that, you saw with the presidential year last year that a lot of voters turn out because it is a presidential. And you continue to see, I think, some of these changes in election laws, such as early in-person voting, that I feel good that we'll be able to encourage Republican voters to get out and vote early in person. I'd like to see, probably a photo ID, making sure put in the Constitution that it requires a photo ID to actually vote. Let's be honest, Gerrymander Jocelyn having a Chinese national vote, and that's just the one we know about last year, is disgusting and wrong. I mean, it canceled out your vote, and yet there doesn't seem to be any consequences for this, and they didn't even catch him. He turned himself in.
And for the media, they consistently, and notice that story went out as a Detroit News exclusive first. Why would a news story be an exclusive unless the goal is to stage manage the news and to try to manage the fallout? And so it was presented as not a failure of government, but as the system working because he was caught. He wasn't caught. And in fact, the way he turned himself in is actually worse than if he hadn't been caught. Because he's the one you know about, and the only reason you know is because he turned himself in, and you know that too? So basically, 10,000 people could have done what this guy just did.
We don't know. They were pushing them, just use your student ID on campus.
Yeah.
And believe me, University of Michigan, Michigan State have huge international populations, right? And how many of them voted? And I think this is a question, I know Speaker Hall has set up a very powerful oversight committee. Jay DeBoyer, the state rep from St. Clair County and Northern Macomb County, has stepped up as chair. And I've told, I've asked Speaker Hall, it's like, I think this is one of those areas where we need to get to the bottom. Like, one's bad, but if one turned themselves in, I'm guessing there's hundreds of them. Yes. Thousands? I don't know.
You can't put a cap on it. And that, because that's the one that opens the door for 10,000. And if the Chinese specifically wanted to sow discord and distrust in our election system, that's how you go about doing it. Not, the guy from Mexico stumbles off a food truck and winds up voting. No, a Chinese, that's the last country we want to hear from, except maybe Russia. Well, it is psychological warfare, I believe.
Well, and then Northern Michigan, we're the two Chinese that were arrested, on a military installation up north. And at the end of the day, we have some, wonderful Chinese Americans here in Michigan, great people heading to the vibrancy of our state, small business owners. But the Chinese Communist Party is our enemy, and it's something that we have to take on and we have to take serious. This is not that President Xi and the Chinese Communist Party are enemies of the United States. I think Donald Trump understands that, and he knows it.
Yeah.
And it's something where it's national security needs to come first. And we got to do a lot better job at knowing who's coming into our country, who's coming through. I mean, I visited the border with Speaker Hall a year ago, last March in Eagle Pass. And what the Biden administration did, the Biden-Harris administration did this country the last 4 years ago was criminal. And thank God that President Trump's turning that away and changing that over now.
Aric, we'll get you out of here on this one. I want to thank you, first of all, for taking so much time with us. This has been great. We'll get you out of here on this one. Our beloved governor, Gretchen Whitmer, is now a lame duck. I believe we are in the midst of, actually, her last 2 years in the public service. What do you think becomes of our governor?
I mean, she wants to run for president. We all know that. And that's
I don't see it happening.
That's the setup. I think the way the media reacts to the Democrats and treats the Democrats, it'll be the same treatment that Waltz was when he left Minnesota. It'll be pretty harsh. And so my 2 cents is I just hope the next 2 years that she turns away from the far left of the Democratic Party that she's embraced, the totalitarianism, the socialism, the wokeness that she's embraced the last 6 years. And I'm somebody that can believe in forgiveness and salvation. And let's go ahead and let's do something pragmatic, like actually keep her promise of fixing the damn roads without a tax increase. Let's actually pay down our long-term debt so that our children and grandchildren get a check instead of a bill when they grow up. And let's take instead of this, let's take education seriously, and we can do some reforms instead of to education to provide choice and accountability and standards. But I'm not going to hold my breath. But I'm always hopeful that somebody can change their mind and see the failures of their ways.
Aric, where can people learn more about yourself, your plan, your campaign?
Yeah, so NesbittForGovernor.com is the website. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, any of the other social media sites. Happy to, if there's an event or roundtable or something in your community. I know this is early. I'm trying to, go from 55,000 miles a year to over 100,000 miles a year around this great state. And so, NesbittForGovernor.com. It is Aric with an A when you spell it. Middle of 5 kids, growing up on a dairy and grape farm, you realize why they had 5 kids. Labor was a lot cheaper that way, but we all started with A's. And by the time Mom got to me, it was either going to be Aric or Erica with an A, and I'm kind of glad she went with Aric. I probably would have been a little tougher if it was Erica. So,
Erica, but would have been. What was with the A's?
I think she just started that way. My mom's name's Ann, and then my oldest brother is Andrew, Aaron, Eric, April, and the youngest got the best deal. She's the angel in the family. My dad, he was the one out. He was the hippie in the family, and long beard, long hair. I always, never wore a shirt in the summertime. Carhartt man. If you look at the opening video, the intro video, you see that Carhartt man shoveling snow. Mm-hmm. That's my dad. If you watch the first 7 seconds of my launch video again.
Is it?
Yeah, original Carhartt man.
Very cool. Well, Aric, I want to thank you for taking the time, and I want to thank you also for jumping in this race. We need candidates. And the bottom line is, Jocelyn Benson's weak. Mike Duggan is the kind of guy who leaves his wife when he gets a good job and leaves his party when they lose an election. Pete Buttigieg is a Notre Dame fan, not a Lions fan. I'm not who. It's like Drake said, if all I hear is me, then who should I be afraid of? Who's the most fearsome of the Democrats at this point, honestly?
I'll leave that up to the political prognosticators to predict. I'm going to work to offer a positive vision for the state.
Yes.
One that puts Michiganders first. And at the end of the day, I think Michiganders deserve a governor that works just as hard as they do, and a Michigan governor who cares more about whether or not your kids are able to read than being able to sell a book in Martha's Vineyard or in San Francisco.
Absolutely. Aric, thank you so much.
Hey, thanks. God bless.